Have you ever wondered why someone would choose silence for 12 long years? Not because they have nothing to say, but because what they know has the power to destroy everything. This is the story of Emily Carter, a woman who stayed silent for 12 years, and the day she decided to speak, nothing survived the truth. Emily Carter looked ordinary. So ordinary that no one ever imagined what was buried inside her. For the past 12 years, she had lived the same way, in the same place, following the same rule, silence. She never spoke about her past, never gave full answers, and never let anyone get too close. People thought she was just a quiet, reserved woman. What they didn't understand was that sometimes silence isn't a personality, it's protection. Emily's life followed a strange, almost perfect routine. Every day looked the same. Every morning began the same way. Every night ended at the same hour. She worked at a small coffee shop where people came and went, laughing, talking, sharing pieces of their lives. Emily listened. She watched, but she rarely spoke. There was a tiredness in her eyes that sleep could never fix, and a weight in her voice that no one could explain. There were things people noticed but chose to ignore. Emily never went near children. Loud noises made her flinch. And whenever a police car passed by, her hands would start shaking uncontrollably. Once inside the coffee shop, someone laughed loudly as part of a joke. The cup slipped from Emily's hand and shattered on the floor. For a few seconds, she just stood there, frozen, as if she wasn't really present. Then she said nothing and quietly walked out. People found it strange, but no one asked why. But Emily hadn't always been this way. 12 years ago, she was living in Chicago. She was only 22 years old, full of life, full of dreams, and completely unaware of what was waiting for her. Her life was normal, until one night changed everything. A night she never talked about. A night where no one died, but something happened that was worse than death. And that was the night Emily made a decision. She would never tell anyone the truth. That decision wasn't born out of weakness. Emily knew that if she spoke, no one would believe her. And even if someone did, they wouldn't be safe. So she turned silence into her shield. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. And years turned into 12 long, quiet seasons of pretending everything was fine. Everything stayed under control. At least, that's what Emily believed. Until one day, a new man walked into the coffee shop. He ordered like any other customer. He smiled like anyone else. But the moment Emily saw him, the color drained from her face. His name was Aaron Blake. He was new in town, a detective. He wasn't the man Emily feared, but he was connected to the story she had buried for 12 years. For the first time, Emily felt her past standing directly in front of her. One thought echoed inside her mind. How did it find me here? She knew, from that moment on, nothing would remain the same. Because some secrets don't stay buried forever. The deeper you hide them, the harder they come back. And Emily's secret had just awakened. Emily knew immediately that this was no longer an ordinary day. The moment Aaron Blake walked into the coffee shop, something inside her cracked. He smiled, placed his order, and sat in a corner as if he had been here before. Emily tried to steady herself, but her hands were trembling. She couldn't remember the last time someone's presence had affected her like this. She knew one thing for sure. This man hadn't entered her life by accident. Aaron Blake was new to the town, but his eyes didn't feel new. He didn't look at people the way others did. He observed them carefully, as if every movement carried meaning. When his eyes met Emily's, he didn't look away immediately. Just a few seconds, but for Emily, those seconds felt like years. Then he turned away, but by then, he had already seen what he needed to see. From that day on, Emily's carefully controlled routine began to fall apart. She went to bed on time, but sleep refused to come. She showed up for work, but her mind was never fully there. A constant feeling followed her, that someone was watching, that someone was listening to her silence. And the most unsettling part was this. Aaron Blake started coming back to the coffee shop. Not every day, but often enough that Emily couldn't ignore his presence. At first, Aaron didn't ask questions. He simply watched, listened, and remembered. It was as if he was waiting for Emily to speak on her own. But Emily knew that one wrong word could open a door she had locked 12 years ago. A door she had survived by keeping shut. So she stayed silent, just as she always had. But Aaron Blake wasn't just another customer. He was digging through old records, forgotten cases, incomplete files, reports that time had buried. One file, in particular, refused to let go of him. 12 years old, connected to Chicago. A case with no suspect, no witnesses, and something even stranger. A young woman who had vanished without leaving a trace. When Aaron saw the photograph in that file, he froze. The difference between the girl in the picture and the quiet woman working at the coffee shop was small. Time had changed her face, but not her eyes. The same restrained fear, the same buried pain. For the first time, Aaron read the name out loud, Emily Carter. That same night, Emily realized she was no longer alone. A car stopped outside her house for a few moments. No door opened. No one stepped out. But from behind the curtain, Emily saw everything. Her heart raced. She knew this wasn't coincidence. Her past had reached her doorstep. Emily hadn't chosen silence 12 years ago because she was weak. She chose it because she understood the cost of truth. If certain names were spoken, powerful people would be shaken. And if certain secrets came out, even justice would turn its face away. Some truths don't bring freedom. They bring destruction. Now the question was no longer when Emily would speak. The real question was whether she would be allowed to. Because when a truth buried for 12 years starts to rise, there are people who will do anything to bury it again. And Emily knew that better than anyone. That night, for the first time, Emily considered changing her decision. Maybe silence was no longer protection. Maybe hiding the truth had become the greatest danger of all. But she also knew this. If she took even one step forward, there would be no way back. Because when 12 years of silence finally breaks, it doesn't just make noise, it releases devastation. Emily tried to convince herself that nothing had changed, but deep down she knew that everything had. The silence she had relied on for 12 years no longer felt safe. It felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. Every sound in her house seemed louder at night. Every shadow felt closer. She locked her doors twice, then checked them again, knowing it wouldn't really help. Once the past starts moving, no lock is strong enough to stop it. Aaron Blake, meanwhile, was no longer following instinct alone. Patterns were forming. Too many coincidences lined up around one name, one face, one disappearance. Emily Carter hadn't just vanished from Chicago 12 years ago. She had been erased. Records were missing. Statements were incomplete. And the people connected to the case had either moved away, been promoted, or chosen to forget. That kind of disappearance didn't happen by accident. It happened when someone powerful wanted it to. Aaron returned to the coffee shop the next day. But this time, he didn't sit quietly. When Emily handed him his cup, their fingers brushed for a brief second. Emily pulled her hand back instantly. Aaron looked at her and spoke softly, not as a detective, but as someone testing the ground beneath his feet. He said her name. Just her name. Emily froze. Hearing it spoken like that felt like a crack running through her chest. She forced herself to look away, pretending not to hear, pretending she was still invisible. That night, Emily dreamed of Chicago. Streets she hadn't walked in years. A door she had sworn never to remember. She woke up breathless, her heart pounding, her body soaked in fear. She sat on the edge of her bed and realized something terrifying. The memories were no longer staying buried. They were coming back on their own. And once memories return, silence becomes impossible. Aaron pushed deeper into the case. He found a retired officer who remembered the night Emily disappeared. The man's voice shook when he spoke, not from age, but from guilt. He said the case had been handled from above. He said certain questions were never meant to be asked. And when Aaron pressed for names, the man went quiet. Too quiet. Then he warned him, some truths cost more than a career. Emily felt the pressure tightening from all sides. She noticed unfamiliar cars parked down the street. Phone calls that disconnected the moment she answered. People at work watching her just a little too closely. She understood the message without it being spoken. Someone knew she was still alive. Someone knew the truth hadn't fully died. For the first time in 12 years, Emily picked up her phone with the intention of telling someone everything. Her thumb hovered over the screen, shaking. She imagined the faces that would change forever once the truth came out. She imagined the consequences she had spent 12 years avoiding. And she realized something painful. Staying silent had protected others more than it had protected her. Erin received an anonymous envelope that same day. Inside was a single photograph and a note with only 4 words written on it. Stop digging, or else. The photograph showed Emily, taken recently, standing outside her house. Erin felt a chill move through him. This was no longer about solving a cold case. This was about stopping something that was still alive, still watching, and still dangerous. Emily and Erin crossed paths again that evening. This time, Emily didn't look away. She looked directly at him, her eyes carrying years of unspoken truth. She didn't confess. She didn't explain. She only said one sentence, barely louder than a whisper. She told him that if he kept looking for answers, people would get hurt. Then she walked away before he could respond. That was the moment Erin understood the truth Emily had been living with for 12 years. This wasn't just her story. It never had been. It was a story tied to power, protection, and silence enforced by fear. And now that silence was cracking. As Emily closed her door that night, she knew she had reached the edge. She could feel it, the calm before something violent, something irreversible. 12 years of silence had brought her to this moment. And whether she spoke or not, the truth was already moving on its own. Because once a secret starts demanding to be heard, it doesn't ask for permission. It takes it. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay still in the darkness, listening to her own breathing, counting the seconds between each sound outside her window. Every car that passed felt slower. Every distant footstep felt closer. She knew something had shifted. The warning she gave Erin wasn't meant to scare him away. It was a confession disguised as fear. Erin, on the other hand, did exactly what she hoped he wouldn't do. He went further. The photograph in the envelope wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Someone had been watching Emily. Recently. That meant the people behind the Chicago case weren't finished. They were alert. And now they were nervous. Erin requested access to sealed files. The answer came back within hours. Denied. No explanation. No appeal. That alone told him everything. The system wasn't broken. It was protecting itself. And Emily Carter was standing right in the middle of it. He drove to her house just before sunset. Not as a detective. Not with a badge. Just as a man who needed the truth before it was erased again. Emily saw his car pull up from behind the curtain. For a moment, she considered not answering. But running had already cost her 12 years. She opened the door. They stood there in silence, the kind that carries weight. Erin spoke first. He didn't ask about Chicago. He didn't ask about the case. He asked her one simple question: how long she had been waiting for someone to find her. Emily looked at him, and for the first time, her silence broke in a way that mattered. She told him she hadn't been hiding. She had been surviving. Inside, Emily finally said the words she had buried for 12 years. She didn't give details. Not yet. But she told him enough to understand the shape of the truth. That night in Chicago hadn't been random. It had been orchestrated. And when she tried to speak back then, she was warned. When she pushed again, she was erased. Her disappearance wasn't an escape. It was a condition. Erin realized something chilling. The people involved weren't criminals hiding in shadows. They were respected, untouchable, protected by silence, paperwork, and fear. And Emily was the only loose end that had never truly disappeared. The next morning, the coffee shop was closed. A handwritten sign on the door said it was temporary. Emily didn't show up for work. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Erin drove to her house and found the door unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. No struggle. No note. Just absence. On the kitchen table, there was a single object left behind. A folded piece of paper with a name written on it. One name Erin had seen before in the sealed files. One name connected to authority, influence, and the night Emily lost her life as she knew it. Erin understood immediately. Emily hadn't disappeared again. She had stepped forward. And that made her more dangerous than ever. Because when a victim stops running and starts naming names, silence becomes impossible to control. Aaron didn't tell anyone about the paper Emily left behind. He didn't log it, didn't scan it, didn't report it. He knew the moment he did, the name would disappear just like everything else connected to this case. Instead, he memorized it. He understood now what Emily had done. She hadn't run. She had walked straight into the fire, knowing exactly what it would cost her. Days passed, and then weeks. Officially, Emily Carter was listed as missing. Unofficially, everyone who mattered knew what that meant. The sealed files were quietly reopened. Old reports were revised. Certain people suddenly requested early retirement. Others hired lawyers. The city didn't explode with scandal. It cracked slowly, silently, the way powerful systems always do when the truth starts leaking from the inside. Aaron was warned more than once to stop. Friendly advice at first, then not so friendly. But he kept going, not because he thought he could win, but because Emily had already paid the price for staying silent. He followed the trail Emily left behind. Names, dates, connections that formed a picture too clear to ignore. The night in Chicago had never been about one woman. It had been about control, about teaching someone what happens when they try to speak. Emily never came back to Raven Hollow. No one ever saw her again. But she hadn't vanished this time. She had made sure her truth would outlive her silence. What she gave up in presence, she gained in impact. The people who destroyed her life didn't fall overnight, but they were never untouchable again. The fear changed sides. Aaron resigned from the force a year later. Not in defeat, but in understanding. He knew some battles aren't meant to be won loudly. Some are meant to be exposed quietly, until the weight of truth becomes impossible to carry. And Emily Carter? She became something more than a victim. She became a reminder. A name that never fully disappeared. A story that refused to stay buried. Because silence can protect you for a while, but it always has an expiration date. The truth doesn't need a voice to exist, but it does need courage to survive. When silence is forced by fear, it protects the powerful, not the innocent. And when one person finally chooses to break that silence, even at the cost of everything, it proves one thing. You can erase a person, but you can never fully erase the truth.